Well, good morning. I'd like to call the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Digital Commerce and Consumer Protection to order. And I also want to thank our witnesses for being here this morning, and I recognize myself for a 5-minute opening statement. 1 month ago, this subcommittee was the first to hear testimony from former Equifax CEO Richard Smith about how his company's failure to protect against a known data security vulnerability led to the exposure of over 145 million Americans' sensitive information. Today, we continue our investigation into Equifax breach. We will focus on helping the public get answers. How is the industry responding to this breach? What the industry response has been to this breach? Has the cybersecurity landscape changed as a result of the breach? And what laws and regulations govern the protection of individuals' information collected by businesses? On Friday, our full committee chairman, Greg Walden, raised questions about how the actions taken by businesses that use personal data affects security, privacy, and individuals' online identities. The Equifax data breach was a stark demonstration of the responsibility that credit bureaus and all companies have when holding millions of Americans' sensitive information. In fact, Congress has recognized the sensitivity of this data and specifically enacted laws regarding the credit bureau's business model. Today, we are looking for answers about how best to secure consumers' credit data in order to protect against another breach of this magnitude. We want to shine a light on security practices and understand the path forward to restore confidence to U.S. consumers. For example, lenders, including banks and retailers, use credit reports and related data to evaluate the likelihood that borrowers will repay their loans. This credit information assists consumers in assessing credit, buying a house, or securing a job. However, consumers may not know or understand what data has been collected on them and how it's being used by the credit reporting industry and their paying customers, including the federal government. Today, we hope to shed light on this question and provide more information for those consumers. With regard to Equifax, the subcommittee has taken a comprehensive review of the circumstances surrounding the breach. For example, it came to our attention last month that the Internal Revenue Service had awarded a no-bid contract to Equifax. On October 10th, Ranking Member Schakowsky and I, along with Chairman Walden and Ranking Member Pallone, sent a bipartisan letter to the IRS Commissioner raising questions about the IRS decision to award a contract to Equifax for identity verification services in the aftermath of the Equifax breach. The contract has since been rescinded. We also sent a bipartisan letter on October 16th to the General Services Administration about the agency's consideration of data security practices when vetting vendors like Equifax in awarding government contracts. We're looking forward to the GSA's response. Chairman Walden and I remain committed to working in a bipartisan fashion to get answers for the American public and to hold Equifax accountable. When former CEO Richard Smith came to Washington last month, he said, quote, "The breach occurred because of both human error and technology failures." These quote-unquote errors and failures allowed criminals to access over 145 million Americans' data. As a result, names, addresses, birth dates, and full 9-digit Social Security numbers were exposed. And certain driver's licenses, credit cards, and credit dispute information were taken. If your credit card information is stolen, you can contact Visa or MasterCard, and they'll reissue a new card and a credit card number. If your Social Security number is stolen, it's much more complicated to get a new number. A Social Security number is intrinsically tied to each and every one of us. According to the FTC, there were nearly 400,000 identity theft complaints in 2016, which amounts to 13% of all consumer complaints received. Nearly 30% of consumers reported that their data was used to commit tax fraud in 2016. Consumers also reported that their stolen data was used for credit card fraud, rising to more than 32% in 2016 from nearly 16% in 2015. In the aftermath of the Equifax breach, months later, consumers may still be confused about how best to protect themselves. The subcommittee and agencies like the Federal Trade Commission have been providing useful information to consumers in the aftermath of the Equifax breach. But the post-breach consumer protection responses from Equifax have yet to be reassuring. Data collected and stored by credit bureaus must be protected and safeguarded at all times, and when a breach happens, consumers need swift and concrete answers from the company affected. There are important questions about the best ways to protect sensitive data, including cybersecurity standard trends, best practices, and emerging threats, particularly with respect to known cybersecurity vulnerabilities. There are also important questions about the regulatory landscape in which the credit bureaus operated before this massive breach, especially the legal and regulatory framework for credit bureaus, including the safeguards framework in the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act and consumer protections contained in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Also, what is the relationship between data breaches and the incidence of identity theft and fraud? Data breaches may have become so commonplace that security experts have expressed concerns about breach fatigue. Congress cannot afford to be lax or idle in its oversight of these critical issues. The testimony today is an important step toward answering the many questions that consumers are looking for, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today. And the chair now recognizes the ranking member of the subcommittee from Illinois for 5 minutes.